consider serious calculation important for cultural reasons. It was deep-rooted belief that eclipse was too bad an occasion to have any auspicious act aiming at peace and prosperity be performed. Vedic sacrificial performances conducted for the general harmony, affluence, and welfare of the king and his subjects were not possible during eclipses. A sacrifice aborted by the onset of an eclipse was ignominious, portending degeneration to the patron king, the performer priest, and the kingdom. It was a big shame. Yes, a Vedic ritual, Agni Chayana, lasting sometimes 13 months, 14 months, and so on. Before the completion of the yajna, if a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse befalls, that was considered to be a big shame, because the whole ritual would be aborted. And the patron, the king, and then the priest who officiated it, all would bear the insult. It was a big problem in those days. With the result, their interest was always to have predictive ability about eclipses. How to predict lunar and solar eclipses precisely was an important question. Now, an interesting thing is that you find lot of references in the later Vedic texts and then the later inscriptions to Grahana Kala as Punya Kala. During the Grahana Kala, lot of offerings were made and also a lot of rituals were conducted, not of the Vedic, not of the yajna type, but other rituals to propitiate the deities. And some people therefore argue that Grahana Kala was actually Punya Kala, it was not Papa Kala. Now my feeling is that in the Puranas you find references to Grahana Kala as Punya Kala because that was the need of the hour. It was necessary for people to believe that people would be redeemed of the problems, the dosha, if they had conducted rituals. If they had worshipped, then the dosha due to grahana would be overcome. Which means that would be the period when God is at the call of people. God is amenable to propitiation. So Grahana Kala is actually the Kala of worship, and naturally people were forced to believe that they would be getting out of the consequences of Grahana if they were worshipping gods. With the result, gradually rituals made the Kala as Punya Kala. Or by saying a period as Punya Kala, they really meant that it is Dosha Kala. But the only advantage is that gods are available. Gods are available during the period and you can worship, you will experience God, and naturally that becomes truth. It's in a way an indirect expression of the disturbance of the people or expression of the people teased and frustrated because of the beliefs relating to the dosha of Grahana. This was in fact part of the legitimization of the spread of agamic rituals and cults during the post-Vedic times. That a Vedic sacrifice was never meant as a ritual for redemption from redemption from sin, dosha, parihara, but as the personal aggrandizement of the king accounted for the intensity of pressure on the production of astronomical knowledge sufficient to be predictive about eclipses. It is not accidental that most of those great astronomers of traditional India were Vedic priests. In Kerala, a region of long protracted tradition of Vedic sacrifices, many of the astronomers who had made remarkable contributions to mathematical astronomy were Nambudiri Brahmins of Vedic tradition. And from the suffix, it's very clear suffix of their name. Nilakanta Somayaji, Udumana Somayaji. Somayaji, he has to be taken really seriously, because they had the compulsion that I was referring to. As regards the question of cultural compulsions, it's quite interesting to see the coincidence between the long persistence of the Vedic tradition in Kerala and the path-breaking contributions made by the Brahmanas of Vedic tradition to Indian astronomy. It's a matter of specific significance in the perspective of historical epistemology that several of them had contributed substantially to the techniques of reckoning the solar and lunar eclipses. Madhava's formulation of the solution of transcendental equations based on iteration, the concept of infinite series of sine, cosine, and arctangent, integration of series term by term, tests of convergence of infinite series, approximation of transcendental numbers by continued fractions, etc., were not just the result of his intellectual idiosyncrasy alone. Contemporary political ritual compulsions had indeed a major catalyzing role in the production of the knowledge. Pudumana Somayaji, well known for his Karana Paddhati, that has contributed to improve Madhava's series, was a very prominent scholar in astronomy engaged in eclipse studies. He had produced two works, Grahanastakam and Grahana Ganitam, exclusively in the subject matter, which seek to develop and sustain the faculty to predict the eclipse. It's almost to the dawn of obsession that these great astronomers were taking up the question of eclipse. You don't find a mathematician of the period without devoting a lot of attention to the study of eclipse. They might be certainly interested in higher mathematics and they would be working on, but at the same time, they were all writing one piece or the other, or one piece or two, exclusively on the study of eclipse. Nilakanta Somayaji's Tantra Sangraha that theorizes the epicyclic and eccentric models of planetary motion devotes two chapters. Chandra Grahana Prakarana, 53 slokas, and Ravi Grahana Prakarana in 63 slokas. In fact, there is no specific mathematical context of that. Why still they are working up? That is the cultural need. That is the motto for them to work out the whole thing. And there were people requiring such texts for practice. These were texts for practice. And they certainly developed series and so on, and that they also were necessary for understanding planetary movements. And precise understanding of planetary movements was inevitable for acquiring predictive ability about eclipses. Now we find independently mathematicians working in the area which practitioners were not able to access, they were not able to understand because they were of a high order. The belief that the conduct of sacrificial rituals would go futile in case of the incidence of an eclipse during their performance was the primary compulsion for acquiring knowledge and competency to predict occurrence of eclipse. Being elaborate, long-standing, and expensive in terms of goods, services, rewards, Vedic sacrificial rituals once commenced should have their successful completion was quite important. Losing a sacrifice on the incidence of an eclipse was ignominious to the priests, as I said earlier, and it was a big shame for the priests who officiated that. Now, the overall social context I don't have to elaborate upon. Since circa 800 Common Era, society of Kerala was increasingly agrarian and hierarchically structured under landlordism. The temple was its institutional headquarters and the Nambudiri Brahmanas its custodian. Knowledge about the season was crucial for agriculture, and Nambudiris who had ritual reasons for knowing astronomy possessed predictive knowledge about it. Naturally, they set the calendar for the whole society, not only for economic practices but also for rituals. Beliefs of the Nambudiri Brahmanas constituted their model. Belief in the auspicious time, Muhurtam, became contemporary social obsession. This accounted for the growth of knowledge in astronomy. For calculating Muhurtam, a certain level of mathematics is required, but not of the kind which one would address in the domain of calculus. Now, rise of true mathematics. There is a perceptible epistemic shift in traditional Indian knowledge production in general and Kerala astronomy in particular since the time of Madhava, who made lasting contributions to mathematical astronomy by developing on the differential items in Aryabhatiyam. Inferences drawn from Madhava were subjected to scrutiny and correction by Parameshwara, circa 1360 to 1425 Common Era, and his sons Damodara, circa 1390, 1470 Common Era, and Govinda, circa 1385, 1460 Common Era, Pudumana Somayaji, 1410, 1490 Common Era, Nilaganda Somayaji, 1444, 1544 Common Era, Jyeshtadeva, circa 1500 to 1610 Common Era. Then Makshamangalam Narayana, circa 1540 to 1610 Common Era, and Nalpatur Narayana Bhattagiri. Like that, there are several. They were all treating Aryabhatiyam as the master text. Although they were making improvements, they just called it Aryabhatiya Vyakhya. In a very humble way, they approached the text. Sometimes they were making fundamental changes, or sometimes they were contributing for the first time proof for what Aryabhata said. Still, Aryabhatiyam was considered to be a sacred text. Parameshwara seems to have done direct astronomical observations for 55 years, systematically recorded the results, and wrote a treatise on Drigganita, a mathematical model of astronomy, an example par excellence. His mastery over the external knowledge and sizable contribution to it in the form of new theorems are embodied by the Bhashyas. He wrote on Mahabhaskariya, Aryabhatiya, and Lilavati of Bhaskara II. The mean value theorem propounded by him is considered to be quite crucial and essential subsequent in proving the fundamental theorem of calculus. Similarly, his mean value type formula for inverse interpolation of the sine function, a one-point interactive technique for calculating the sine of a given angle, and a more efficient approximation that works using a two-point interactive algorithm is now understood essentially the same as the modern scan method. He is said to be the first mathematician to provide the radius of a circle with an inscribed cyclic quadrilateral. Similarly, Madhava was first to give the pi value to the nearest. Now, the present computer value is not far different from what Madhava was able to do. Likewise, Nilakanta Somayaji in his Tantra Sangraha carried the process further, producing more clarity in pre-existing theories, particularly expansion of the sine-cosine series of Madhava. He is acclaimed for expanding the methods and theories of Madhava, particularly by elaborating his derivation, improving proofs for his series of the arctangent trigonometric function and other infinite series. Tantra Sangraha is in 432 slokas in Sanskrit and in 8 chapters, generally on the epicycle and eccentric models of planetary motion, but specifically dealing with the motions and longitudes of the planets, various problems related with the sun's position on the celestial sphere, including the relationships of its expressions in the 3 systems of coordinates, namely ecliptic, equatorial, horizontal and horizontal coordinates, the lunar and the solar eclipses, the deviation of the longitudes of the sun and the moon, the rising and setting of the moon and planets, and a graphical representation of the size of the sunshine part of the moon. Nilakanta's study is a clear indication of how new knowledge is created linearly by developing on the results of the previous studies. He is an example worth citing in the context of epistemic universals about knowledge production in traditional Indian, such as rationality, analytical comprehension of the external knowledge, new tools of observation, methodological modification, systematic recording of observational results, mastering of inductive mathematical proofs for previous theorems, hermeneutic additions, and scholarly integration. Tantra Sangraha embodies these epistemic distinctions, which one of its contemporary bhashyas, namely Yukti Bhasha, is said to have highlighted. At the same time, Yukti Bhasha makes contributions of strikingly fresh nature, although Yukti Bhashagara wouldn't claim that. Nilakanda's Aryabhatiya Bhashya, his masterpiece, provides a heliocentric model of the solar system and many results on the calculus. But this is not of the pure heliocentric thing. Here, the interesting thing to be noted is this was the same argument which subsequently Tycho Brahe put up. That is, the entire planets are moving around the sun except Earth. Entire planets and sun would be then moving around the Earth. That was the discovery made by Nilakanta. Nilakanta's heliocentrism was partial in that sense. And this is the maximum limit that one would go with Triganitham. Direct observation and accounting, this would be the thing. To detach oneself from the earth and contemplate the celestial order was something altogether different and impossible. That kind of a discovery was really strange. The real solar system, conceiving all planets moving around the sun, was something which was not empirically given, which was not empirically accessible. Through observation, one wouldn't be able to go to that extent. But calculus could facilitate an imagination, but that kind of an imagination was not accessed by Nilakanta. Insistence of the production of proof as a primary epistemic requirement is best manifest perhaps for the first time in the works of Jyeshtadeva. It's interesting to note that proofs for Madhava's series expanded by Nilakanta into sine, cosine and inverse tangent series were given only after a century by Jeshtadeva in his Yuktibhasha, a Malayalam text, in spite of the constitution of the three crucial power series heading towards the invention of calculus. A comprehensive theory of differentiation or integration was not achieved by him. But now the scholars in calculus say that kind of a fundamental theorization is not necessary. If the basic theorems are made available, higher trigonometric functions are rendered plausible, and that is calculus. And a text is written with pedagogic clarity, how this can be transmitted clearly and how people can be encouraged to learn calculus and then carry it forward. That being the situation, now people are able to wrench themselves